June 16th, 2014. Pilger, Nebraska. An ordinary Monday afternoon sky transformed into total apocalypse in a matter of minutes. Winds peaking at 191 miles per hour tore across the rural acreage, leaving nothing but bare concrete and shattered timber behind. In roughly 80 seconds, a large portion of the town ceased to exist. The destruction proved absolute. A catastrophic anomaly played out above the grid. The parent mesocyclone dropped two fully separate, high-end EF4 tornadoes side by side, operating simultaneously just a mile apart. What actually happened on the day nature broke the established rules of atmospheric physics? With an enormous wedge vortex bearing down on the local population, the mechanical defense systems failed entirely. Automated warning sirens scattered across the municipality remained dead. Hundreds of residents suddenly relied on a single fire chief steering his truck straight toward a dark wall of debris, risking his own survival just to trigger the alarm manually. This community faced an unprecedented sequence of 4 distinct EF4 tornadoes, all born from a single cyclic supercell tracking across northeast Nebraska. They would lose long-standing businesses, generational homes, and innocent lives. Financial damages climbed into the tens of millions, but an even deeper betrayal surfaced years later when a trusted official stole the recovery funds. The sheer scale of the devastation left meteorologists analyzing their radar screens in complete disbelief. This physical event defied historical modeling, proving that even the most advanced forecasting technologies can go blind during rapid, chaotic atmospheric shifts. A rural population sat utterly exposed. So how did an entire municipality find itself trapped in the path of twin rotational monsters with zero automated warning? Subscribe to this channel, and you will start noticing how complex systemic failures like this happen. Grasping these structural breakdowns is the only defense when the baseline environment shifts from calm to lethal. The early afternoon of June 16th presented a standard Midwestern summer profile. Citizens in this region grew heavily conditioned to severe weather watches. They heard dozens of distant sirens in previous years, learning by experience to assume the darkest cells would pass them by. Agricultural workers continued operating heavy machinery in the fields. Families navigated their routine Monday commutes. Yet high in the upper atmosphere, miles to the west, an unstable physical environment actively formed. An immense reservoir of volatile, moist air collided with an aggressive cold front pushing across the Great Plains. This specific interaction locked a colossal rotating updraft directly over the designated warning area. Barometric pressure dropped rapidly, setting a deadly stage. This localized system did not behave like a standard thunderstorm cluster. Extreme thermal instability fueled a cyclic supercell, a specific meteorological formation capable of regenerating its internal rotation over and over again without losing momentum. National Weather Service forecasters tracked the growing signature on Doppler radar, watching the reflectivity data display an enormous, clearly defined hook echo. The sheer volume of heavy precipitation wrapping around the central core made visual confirmation from the ground nearly impossible. A rain-cloaked funnel represents the deadliest phase of tornadic development, blinding trained spotters and completely hiding the true width of the circulation from those caught in its immediate path. The first rural targets lay entirely exposed. At exactly 3:42 p.m., Central Daylight Time, the first violent vortex of the sequence descended from the cloud base near the rural town of Stanton. This initial funnel rapidly intensified, carving a deep, destructive trench across the open countryside. Rated as a violent EF4, the Stanton tornado reached extreme peak velocities, completely leveling isolated farmsteads in a matter of seconds. Raw kinetic force lifted thousands of pounds of heavy agricultural machinery and threw the twisted metal vast distances across bare dirt fields. The parent storm refused to dissipate after releasing its first strike. It actively recycled its energy, pulling massive amounts of inflow wind to generate an even wider, more stable mesocyclone. Shortly after 400 p.m., a distinct secondary circulation tracked directly southwest of the Pilger town limits. This primary funnel expanded rapidly into a huge wedge shape that physically blocked out the horizon line. It churned through the farmland, laying out a direct trajectory for the municipality. National Weather Service forecasters broadcast urgent warnings covering the immediate geographical zone. Electronic signals transmitted to local emergency networks, designed to automatically trigger the outdoor sirens, giving civilians a narrow margin of time to seek underground shelter. A hardware failure intercepted the signal at the worst possible moment. Local municipal warning grids remained dead silent. At 4:02 p.m., local first responders recognized the deadly oversight. Automated warning sirens failed to activate, leaving the entire civilian population unaware of the towering wedge approaching from the southwest. Fire Chief Corey Colmuse processed the terrifying reality immediately. Without those sirens sounding across the blocks, the resulting death toll would multiply. Colmuse made a desperate calculation, placing his own life in the direct path of the oncoming vortex. He pressed the accelerator, steering his truck straight toward the impending storm to reach the central fire station. Throwing the override switch manually was his only option before the advancing wind shear disabled the local electrical grid completely. Every passing second erased another chance of survival. Colmuse reached the station doors just as the afternoon sky turned a bruised, unnatural black. He engaged the manual override, sending the distinct, high-pitched wail of the sirens echoing across the residential blocks. That mechanical scream saved dozens of lives, prompting confused families to abandon their daily routines and sprint directly for their concrete basements. The chief then scrambled into the bay to get the heavy fire engine clear of the immediate collapse zone. He succeeded, securing heavy rescue equipment just minutes before the masonry walls began to fracture. At exactly 4:11 p.m., the core of the main tornado breached the city limits. Physical impact against the buildings sounded like one continuous, deafening explosion. Extreme lateral winds tore straight through the commercial district, stripping asphalt from the pavement. The Midwest Bank took a direct, catastrophic hit. Inside the reinforced facility, Branch President Gene Willers faced an impossible architectural problem. The building housed a heavy concrete vault designed to protect assets, but the thick metal door only featured an external locking mechanism. It physically could not be secured from the inside. Willers looked at his 8 employees as the ceiling above them began to groan and tear apart. He knew the hardened room offered their only chance of surviving the pressure differential. But someone had to remain outside the shelter to force the heavy steel mechanism into the locked position. Willers shoved his entire staff into the confined, windowless space. He pulled the heavy steel door shut, engaged the external locking bolts, and sealed his staff inside, isolating them from the advancing fury of the storm. Acknowledging his own vulnerability, he sprinted away from the hardened walls and dove frantically into a shallow, exposed crawl space. Seconds later, the immense kinetic force of the EF4 reduced the entire Midwest Bank into a sprawling pile of shattered timber, drywall, and twisted metal. The structure disintegrated down to the dirt. Yet, buried beneath tons of commercial rubble, the locked vault held firm against the shear forces. All 8 people sheltering inside the vault survived without a scratch. Willers himself eventually crawled out of the wreckage alive. His sacrifice prevented a total tragedy. Just a few blocks away, the escalating violence of the vortex took a heavier toll. Inside a local mobile home, resident Candy Murphy recognized that the flimsy structure would simply disintegrate under the severe wind load. She grabbed her 5-year-old daughter Callie and 4-year-old daughter Robin, rushing them into the bathroom of their mobile home to take cover. But the timing proved brutally unforgiving. The violent winds tore the mobile home apart as they sheltered inside the bathroom. The sheer aerodynamic lift generated by the low-pressure core hit them with the force of a moving freight train. There were no deep roots to grasp, which meant the lateral wind simply overpowered human grip strength. The mechanical toll of severe weather is always measured in rotational velocities and structural failure points, but the true emotional cost is carried forever by the survivors left standing in the ruins. If this raw story of human endurance against impossible physical odds is hitting different, take a single second to hit like. It genuinely helps the algorithm show this documentary to more people who need to see it. Documenting these precise historical moments ensures that the selfless sacrifices made on the darkest afternoons are never completely erased from our collective memory. The rotating pressure differential tore Candy away from her 2 young children. 4-year-old Robin was sheltered from the full force of the wind, miraculously surviving the storm's impact. Candy was aggressively hurled into the surrounding debris field, sustaining severe physical trauma and lacerations, but rescue crews eventually pulled her from the wreckage breathing. Callie, however, disappeared into the sky. The chaotic, high-velocity air currents carried the 5-year-old girl deep into the dark, churning funnel, claiming her life in an instant. She became the youngest casualty of the Nebraska outbreak, serving as a heartbreaking, permanent reminder of exactly how quickly an ordinary Monday turns lethal. Between 4:13 and 4:30 p.m., just as the first huge wedge ground the central business district into splinters, the eastern twin tornado tracked alongside it to the east. This earned the official designation of the Pilger East Vortex. It rapidly intensified, matching the exact size and relentless ferocity of the primary storm. It established a parallel track, running directly alongside the original funnel. For several terrifying minutes, 2 enormous wedges marched aggressively across the rural farmland side by side. Stunned residents who had just survived the first direct pass crawled out of their shattered basements only to watch a mirrored nightmare tearing through the adjacent fields. This rare visual phenomenon frequently leads to a common civilian misconception. Many observers assume twin tornadoes are simply a single giant storm system producing multiple suction vortices hiding under one extremely wide debris cloud. But the Pilger twins operated as two completely autonomous, deeply rooted EF4 tornadoes, separated by a mere mile of open agricultural ground. Driven by the extreme rotational energy of the same overarching mesocyclone, the strong aerodynamic pull of the two funnels caused them to physically interact. They began to orbit each other in a deadly, mesmerizing meteorological dance known formally as the Fujiwara Effect. The eastern twin accelerated its forward momentum, curving inward toward the original vortex in an unprecedented display of raw atmospheric fluid dynamics. The eastern twin carved its own isolated path of total ruin through the rural outskirts of the county. 74-year-old David Harrowing, a longtime resident of Clarkson, drove his vehicle along the exposed county roads. He likely attempted to navigate a safe perimeter away from the primary western destruction zone when the secondary funnel aggressively intercepted his escape route. The sheer rotational velocity of the eastern twin swept his vehicle completely off the paved surface. Heavy machinery shattered instantly under the wind load, claiming his life. Harrowing became the second fatal victim of the localized outbreak, caught unexpectedly in the unpredictable orbital shift of the two interacting tornadoes. Dual threats made vehicular evacuation virtually impossible for anyone caught driving on the grid. In the immediate aftermath, structural engineers and meteorologists surveyed the leveled municipal grid, stunned by the sheer physical erasure of commercial and residential property. Multi-story homes, bolted directly to deep concrete foundations, sheared down to bare slabs in a matter of seconds. This extreme visual evidence quickly sparked intense rumors among weather enthusiasts, arguing that the total damage warranted a maximum EF5 rating. However, the official National Weather Service survey strictly capped both twins at high-end EF4. Surveyors methodically documented that the destroyed structures relied heavily on unreinforced masonry, and older steel anchor bolts mechanically failed under the immense shear loads. Local buildings simply lacked the modern architectural reinforcement required to withstand extreme atmospheric pressure differentials, keeping the official wind estimates grounded. As the eastern twin finally lost its rotational cohesion and dissipated, the original western funnel began to stretch thin and enter its rope-out phase. But the cyclic supercell was far from finished. At approximately 4:40 p.m., a large fourth EF4 tornado touched down further north, near the town of Wakefield. This rapidly developing vortex exerted a strong aerodynamic pull on the dying primary funnel, eventually absorbing its remnants entirely into the new updraft. During this turbulent atmospheric transition, researchers tracking the final phase calculated an unusual, unofficial record. The dying tornado was forcefully yanked forward at a rare ground speed of 94.6 miles per hour, moving much faster than a highway vehicle before finally vanishing. When the huge debris cloud finally settled, local officials surveyed over $20 million in direct commercial and residential property damage. A large portion of the physical municipal infrastructure vanished permanently, including the local middle school, the bank, and dozens of generational family homes. The broader Nebraska region immediately rallied, pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars in charitable relief donations into the local government accounts to rebuild the decimated community. The sudden disaster created an influx of poorly tracked municipal cash. Over the next several years, former village clerk Kim Naiman systematically drained the town's primary recovery accounts. Entrusted with managing the complex financial rebirth of the shattered municipality, she instead covertly embezzled $700,000. The stolen fortune encompassed both standard operational village funds and the charitable donations specifically meant for families who lost everything to the tornado. Sophisticated financial theft went completely unnoticed for years as the distracted town struggled to pour new concrete foundations and frame new houses. When auditors finally uncovered the embezzlement, the resulting betrayal deeply fractured the community from the inside. The cyclic supercell violently erased their physical homes, but the systemic administrative theft eroded their fundamental trust. Police formally arrested Naiman in 2020, ending a complex, multi-year investigation into the missing recovery funds. The following year, a judge sentenced her to 3 years in state prison for her financial crimes. Firm legal resolution offered some basic civic closure, but the underlying emotional damage left a permanent scar. Yet, despite the deep administrative betrayal and the sheer physical annihilation of their entire municipality, the core citizens steadfastly refused to abandon the rural grid. By the 10th anniversary of the historic disaster in June 2024, the community had made major strides in rebuilding its primary local facilities. Newly poured asphalt streets and reconstructed brick storefronts stand as a visible, defiant response to the chaotic forces that try to erase them. Through sheer collective resilience, the local residents adopted an enduring informal motto: the town too tough to die. The leveled Midwest Bank eventually rose on the exact same commercial footprint where 8 employees survived the collapse of the town's financial center. They walked out of the heavy rubble that afternoon solely because of a single, selfless calculation made in the darkest possible moment. Municipal planners later erected quiet, dignified memorials to formally honor the heavy losses, ensuring that the legacy of those who perished, especially young Callie Dixon, remains permanently anchored in the restored agricultural grid. Freshly planted trees now cast long shadows over the rebuilt foundations. Unprecedented twin tornadoes permanently altered the physical geography of northeast Nebraska. This violent outbreak proved that extreme atmospheric conditions can generate chaotic scenarios that break every established rule of municipal survival. A single cyclic supercell produced 4 huge EF4 funnels, pushing them into a deadly orbital dance that demonstrated unmatched environmental fury. But basic human dignity outlasts the wind shear. True legacies of this disaster live directly in the fire chief who drove toward the dropping funnel, the bank manager who sealed the heavy door, and the desperate mother who held on until the pressure forcibly tore her away. Storms can erase concrete and steel, but they cannot destroy courage. Take care of one another. Every storm eventually ends. If any of this stuck with you, like and subscribe, because there are more stories to share.